Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Cynthia. Good morning, Tom, and everyone who's here. Thank you so much for being here. So early, Tom, it's such an honor and privilege to have you because it's 6:30 in Texas right now. And so it's a real privilege to have you so early. But we have a fabulous wrap up of the year today. Tom is going to tell us about what the year meant in terms of corruption and what we should look for forward to next year. Cynthia?
Thanks, Isabel. So good morning, everyone. Tom, thank you again for your time. I'm sure everyone on this call knows you, your background. I'm sure this is probably, we've probably done over 10 of these over the past several years. But for those of you who are new, Tom is the compliance evangelist, our friend and expert, and someone who shares quarterly information with this group about enforcement trends in the US, Brazil, around the globe, and his perceptions and what to expect. So without further ado, Tom, I would love to hear how you would wrap up 2025 and what you expect for the year to come.
Oh, just one more comment, and this is housekeeping. We don't have an interpreter because nowadays all you have to do is go into the three little dots and set up the language into transcribe it into Portuguese. And then after, when Tom's done with telling everything that he has to tell us, we will collect your questions in Portuguese or English, any way you want, in the section P&R Q&A. Okay? So now, yes, Tom, without further ado.
Well, Isabel and Cynthia, thank you so much. What I thought I would talk about today, as Isabel has indicated, is maybe a wrap up of where we've been and looking forward to where we're going. In my wrap up, it's going to be things that we've talked about extensively over this year. So it's going to sound like a potpourri of different concepts, ideas, strategies that you might be able to use, and what I'm going to hold my remarks a little shorter than usual because I really want to give everyone a chance to ask all the questions you've been saving up. So I don't know if Ricardo Wagner is on with us, but I had the opportunity to interview him yesterday for a speech he's going to make in Washington in December. And we were sort of starting off with what has 2025 been like for a compliance officer. And obviously he is a compliance officer for one of the most important companies in Brazil, but his answer was the same as the $50 million company in Houston, Texas. Chaotic. And although he's very diplomatic, he didn't use that word. He said dynamic, transformative, challenging, and a lot of other words. It's all about change, though. And that has been true in the United States. And unfortunately, because of this administration, they have put that imprint literally across the world. And I don't probably need to tell you guys and ladies what that has meant for U.S.-Brazilian relations. So, but what is our role in all of this? And when the year started, what I tried to emphasize was we, the collective we, and I mean everyone on this call and all of your colleagues, we need to be ready to respond. And we need to be ready to take on new and different risks. And those new and different risks appeared for all of us in 2025. The year started, of course, with the suspension of the FCPA, and many people wondering, will we ever have FCPA again? Well, the answer is yes, we will. Now, the focus is going to be different. So what does that mean for everyone on this call? What I think it means is that the U.S. government is going to target non-U.S. companies. And that means, unfortunately, everybody outside the U.S. And they're going to target those companies who U.S. companies believe unfairly garnered business through bribery and corruption. Now, you can certainly protest that, think that's terrible, think that's the ugly American, and you'd be right in all of those thoughts. But we all have to do business. And I will speak for Isabel and the lawyers on this call. I won't speak for Cynthia and the non-lawyers. But for we lawyers, our job is to advise our clients under the law if we can find a way or craft a way to do business ethically and in compliance with both the U.S. FCPA and the Brazilian Clean Companies Act. That's our job. The law is neutral to us. It's not a good or a bad. It's just the law. Now, as I said, Cynthia may have different views because she's not a lawyer, and that's fine. But we need to be able to respond to these changing focuses of certainly the FCPA. But the great thing is you don't have to do anything different than you have done. You just have to be more robust. And what I mean by that is it's all going to start with your documentation. Documentation at every level of your compliance program. Documentation in your code of conduct training, documentation in your policies and procedures, documentation in your ongoing training and communications with your employees, documentation on the employees you may have terminated for violating your code of conduct policies and procedures, your incentives to do business ethically in compliance, whether those incentives are a part of your year-end discretionary bonus compensation calculation or the promotion of employees up the chain to middle managers or even up to senior managers. Then third parties. This is where we are actually, it's sort of back to the future because yesterday or Monday, I guess Monday was yesterday, I interviewed a woman who's been in third-party due diligence for 15 years. And she said, it's as important as it's ever been. It may be more important now. And for those of us who've been in this field for 20 or more years, that would just seem to be, it's something we've been talking about literally for 20 years. But it's more important now, and it's more important because the Trump administration has broadened out the companies you have to look at that you're doing business with or business for. Now, the legal basis for the Trump administration's change is moving drug cartels to a foreign terrorist organization designation. And under U.S. law, that's the highest level of sanction. That's what we put on people like ISIS or Al-Qaeda. And that is now put on cartels. Now, the difference is with ISIS and Al-Qaeda, they had an ideology that part of the basis of that ideology was to attack the United States or other Westerners, Europeans, Brazilians, anyone who was not a Muslim. The cartels are not ideology-based. They're transactional-based. They are money-making machines. And so does a foreign terrorist designation work for a transaction-based organization as opposed to an ideological base? That is an open question that we will be exploring, no doubt, during the entire Trump administration. But the challenge for everyone on this call means you have to know to the absolute best of your ability who you are doing business with, both on the supply chain side and the customer side, because with a foreign terrorist organization designation, if you're doing business with either a foreign terrorist or someone who is a front or shell company for a foreign terrorist, you are absolutely liable. That means whether you're buying supplies from them or you're selling to them. Now, in the United States, so I think everyone knows I'm from the great state of Texas. We live on the border with Mexico. Trade with Mexico has been integral to the state of Texas since before it was a state. Before it was a state, we were our own nation. Before we were our own nation, we were a province of Mexico. Well, that's the interrelated nature of Texas and Mexico. So it is not unusual for everyone in this state to have some business that touches Mexico, whether it is as a supplier in your supply chain or whether as a customer that you sell goods into Mexico. Well, now you have to do due diligence on all of those parties. You've never done business that you know of with cartels. You're as antithetical to cartels as one can be. But if you haven't done due diligence, then, and it turns out that one of those businesses you're dealing with is a front company, you're 100% liable. You have no defense. Well, now think about that for everyone on this call and what that means. Are you doing business in Mexico? The Trump administration is beginning to move south into Central and Latin America for these designations of cartels to foreign terrorist organizations. It would be no surprise that the cartels in Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, or other Latin American countries will be designated, cartels will be designated as foreign terrorist organizations. And you may be inadvertently doing business with those who do business with them. You're going to have to do enhanced due diligence, and you're going to have to go past level 1. So, but if there is a good news out of all this, you know how to do that. We all know how to do that. There are vendors who know how to do this. And people on this call know how to evaluate the information that a vendor may, a due diligence vendor may provide to you. And so I think it will require additional work, but it's skills that we all have and we all have used daily in our compliance program. So it's everything that we used to think was important. It's just now more important. And it's crazy that in 2025, we're talking about enhanced due diligence on third parties, but we are, because there's a new group of third parties we have to look at in a way we've never looked at before. So the due diligence around this foreign terrorist organization designation, or you may hear the term FTO, because we use acronyms in America. If it's an FTO, strict liability, you have to do due diligence. But in terms of Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, I think what the key is your documentation of everything that you have done that complies with your compliance program. And so if any regulator does come knocking, you can show that. As to what all of this means going forward, I think one will be much more of the same, except just more of it. The Trump administration has made clear they have no use for monitors. They believe that once a company pays, either gets a declination or pays the fine, that's it. They have no interest in ensuring that the company does business ethically and in compliance going forward. But what they have said is, if you go through our process and you get a settlement with us and you have no monitor, but you have a second violation, then we will bring the hammer down. Now, we haven't had, we're still in our first year of the Trump administration, so we've not had that fact pattern come up yet. But what that means is, once again, as counterintuitive as this will sound, it will put more pressure on your compliance program after you have settled your case. And it used to be if you had a monitor, and I know one person on this call has been a monitor, and the monitor is there to help the company get through the DPA and to build out a compliance program. and to help the company so that it will continue to do business ethically and in compliance at the conclusion of the monitorship. It can be a challenge. It can be perceived to be difficult, but there have been many, many, many U.S. companies who've gone through the process, and not just U.S. companies who've gone through the process. And at the end of the process, they said, we're a better company because we had the monitor. And that's something that this Trump administration does not believe is either correct or something they believe in. So if you come out of a settlement with the Department of Justice, the people in the compliance functions are going to be the ones under the pressure to make sure your compliance function is robust and is working going forward. Because if you have a second violation, it could be very, very bad for you. So that's a little bit of a change. And once again, it would not seem like doing away with monitors would make compliance more important, but it actually does. And it makes everyone who has company has gone through that process. In terms of self-disclosures and obtaining a declination, the U.S. government has put great incentives in place to self-disclose now. The DOJ wants companies to self-disclose, and if you self-disclose, if you have a robust investigation and you remediate, you can pretty much be guaranteed a declination with appropriate remediation of any ill-gotten gains or profit disgorgement. So once again, while it may seem incorrect to say, well, the Trump administration is really not going to enforce the FCPA, it's putting more pressure on compliance programs. Because if you discover something and self-disclose, you can get a clean pass. Now, there's one thing that has come up recently that I have to say, because it's a new wrinkle we've not seen before, and it's the following. There is a U.S. company called Smartmatic, and they are involved in voting systems. And I think, as everyone knows, there was a huge brouhaha over voting in the 2020 election. Well, Smartmatic got accused of doing a lot of wrong things. They sued a lot of people. They sued press. They sued others for defamation. And but the prior U.S. administration, meaning the Biden administration, had brought criminal charges against certain executives of the firm for paying bribes in the Philippines. That's an FCPA violation. Well, within the last month, the Department of Justice has criminally indicted Smartmatic. First unusual point about this, we haven't had a criminal indictment against a company for 15 years. Companies are never criminally indicted, although we have, it has happened in the past, but 15 years since the last one. That's point number one, that you can be criminally indicted. But point number two, and the more troubling point, is Smartmatic had been cooperating with the Department of Justice, and they had provided the information on the executives after self-disclosure that led to the executives being criminally indicted. Well, now the DOJ has turned around and indicted Smartmatic on information they turned over. So now you have to raise that if you have the conversation with your senior executives or your board of directors on whether you self-disclose. And one point you have to now say is, if we turn this information over to the government may turn around and use it against us. It could be this administration. It could be a new administration. It could be something changes during the middle of this administration because, as Ricardo said, we live in chaotic times. So I just have to raise that. And for the lawyers on this call who've either have had to have that discussion with senior executives or will have to have that discussion on whether or not to self-disclose, I think it's a point you're going to have to raise, however small the chance is going forward. And what that does to the overall U.S. declination policy, I don't know, because this is so new, but it's something that I feel like I needed to raise. So Let's see. Looks like I've gone about 20 minutes. Maybe I should stop there and ask both Cynthia and Isabel, do you all have any questions about really anything I've said so far before we maybe open it up for the group?
Thank you so much, Tom. It's been a real eye-opening because we always talk about how we are kind of, not in feeling very hopeful in terms of compliance, but this was very good. Cynthia, do you have anything?
I do. As Tom was talking, I was jotting down several questions. So I'll ask a few, and hopefully the group will step in and let us know what they'd like to talk about. Tom, how closely are the DOJ and the SEC coordinating today?
Well, they appear to be coordinating quite closely, but we haven't had any enforcement actions involving both to know that precisely.
Yes, that's an excellent question because we try to explain here in Brazil technically what it means for the Trump administration to have quote unquote suspended the enforcement of the FCPAs just because he's the boss and he tells the prosecutors don't go ahead and apply the law, but the law's there and it's valid and it will ever be until it's revoked, right, Tom?
Right.
But the prosecutors, and that's my practical question before Cynthia, you pick up Diane's questions after this one. But I was going to ask you, Tom, can the prosecutors do things on their own? Like, they have a case that they want to investigate and do it, or will they be punished if they don't follow the orders?
I didn't hear the start of that question.
Oh, the question is, I know that Trump has quote unquote suspended the enforcement of the FCPA, but can the prosecutors sort of start a case nevertheless?
Okay. First of all, that suspension has been lifted. So prosecutors can prosecute a FCPA case. What I think is going to happen is there's going to be more guidance from the top of the Department of Justice, literally all the way up to the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General on whether or not prosecutors will be allowed to investigate. I don't think they can open their own cases. I think it'll be much more oversight of whoever is remaining in the FCPA unit.
Yes, that's the kind of clarification I was looking for because it becomes very practical, right? And prosecutors sort of would like to have a mind of their own and go ahead and do what they want. But anyway, that's clear. Thank you. Cynthia?
Tom, we have a question here from Diane Nabuku. What FCPA, DOJ, or SEC cases have initiated during the Trump administration? Any key takeaways?
So in the FCPA world, we are not aware of any that have been initiated. That does not mean there are none because unless a company makes a public announcement, we don't know. And we haven't had any public companies who have to make public announcements, meaning they're on a stock exchange as opposed to privately held, announce that the Department of Justice is investigating them around the FCPA. So the answer is we don't know at this point.
Okay.
And then Tom, I think during our last one of our last breakfasts, you had was speculation. I don't know, by all of us, by the audience, that perhaps by the U.S. enforcing less global infractions, that maybe other jurisdiction would kind of pick up and be the global leaders of enforcement of corruption and bribery cases globally. Did that happen, or was there a global pause?
Well, of course, we have sort of a joint venture between the United Kingdom, France, and Switzerland to pursue anti-corruption cases. We haven't seen, or once again, we're kind of constrained in our knowledge here. If there's no public announcement, we don't know about it. And these cases take years usually to come together before there's a public announcement. So we haven't seen any of the non-U.S. prosecutors, including the Brazilian judiciary with the Clean Companies Act, UK, France, Switzerland, Germany, Singapore, have specific anti-corruption cases. We've had some cases in Singapore from more fraud scandals, but those were cases that were in the pipeline for several years. Of course, 1MDB is still hanging around, if anybody remembers that case. So we still hear some things about that case every once in a while, but no publicly announced resolution that I can point you to, once again, because these cases just take so long to develop.
Okay, let me go to a different direction right now in terms of monitorship that you mentioned. Completely understood what you said, that the Trump administration's not interested in having the monitorship anymore once the company pays the fines or has a declination. But if the company decides to have one, just in terms of that mindset of let's do what we should be doing, just in case everything changes, right? Then they can have their monitors if they want, but obviously they don't have to go and get the stamp of the DOJ and SEC, I would assume. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Do you see that happening? And that's what I want to hear about now. The practical terms, what are companies doing? Because I think that as everyone here on this webinar knows, that we have so many subsidiaries of the U.S. companies. What are they doing there that we here in Brazil should be look for?
So what U.S. companies are doing is they, as a part of a settlement process, whether that settlement is a declination, whether that settlement is a non-prosecution agreement or a deferred prosecution agreement, there are 4 components. 1 is self-disclosure or not. 2 is the quality of your investigation. 3 is the robustness of your remediation. And then 4 is, did you pay back any ill-gotten gains? And so in the investigation and the remediation, you still have to have first-class investigation by counsel who is trusted by the government. And the remediation has to show we have identified the problem, we have done a root cause analysis, we have fixed our problem based upon the root cause analysis, and then we have remediated our compliance program so that the same problem will not reappear later. So the pressure on compliance is really in that remediation. And as I tried to say in my opening remarks, that now the pressure is greater on compliance programs to make sure it doesn't happen again. Before, if you had a monitor and it happened again, you really, and you may know this better than I, Isabel, but if something happened, the monitor would certainly look at it, but because the monitor was in place, the government may have allowed the company to fix that second problem. Well, now if you have a second problem, I think the government's going to be much more harsh.
Understood. Folks on this webinar, please place your questions on the Q&R session, but if you don't do that, Cynthia and I are in paradise. We have many questions here. Cynthia, do you have it?
I do. Tom, I think one thing that was really novel to me was when you were describing how third-party risk has broadened, right, by new categories that compliance officers now need to include in their third-party due diligence and risk assessments. Could you perhaps expand a little bit on whether the government has provided descriptions as to who these third parties are and how the people on this call can properly mitigate those risks and make sure that they're, to take into consideration this broadened view?
Sure. So start with your regular definition of third parties, and a third party is someone outside your organization that you're doing business with. It can be a customer, it can be a supplier, can be a vendor on the sales side. We're all very aware and I think very comfortable looking at vendors on the sales side of our business because that was previously viewed as the highest risk for a corruption violation. Well, now you may need to look at third parties who your company has done business with for years, but you've never looked at around the rigor of who are they, who are the owners, how are they doing business, do they have a compliance program, are they willing to sign up to your compliance program, have they had compliance training, all of the things you would do with a vendor on the sales side, you now have to do with vendors, certainly in the supply chain, but also with your customers. Because if you are using a bank in Mexico and it turns out that bank is a shell company or at least has ownership that the cartel has a part of, well, you're now doing business with someone the cartel's doing business with. And that violates the FTO designation. So you're now strictly liable for that. And you may have thought, well, this is just where we have our bank account to pay our employees or pay our suppliers in Mexico so we can pay them in pesos. So it's not that the definition has changed. It's just that there are more of your third parties you must evaluate now for their ownership, for their beneficial ownership, and for their compliance programs going forward.
Wow. Thank you, Tom. We have a question now from Rodrigo Moreno. Hi, Rodrigo. Good to have you here. And how can compliance lawyers and consultants practically prepare to better support their clients amid the changes in FCPA enforcement under the current Trump administration? Sorry, I have to read it. Should they modify any internal policies or compliance strategies to adapt to this new scenario? And is there any possibility that the government might reverse previous decisions regarding the law's enforcement? That's a good one.
So let me take the last one first. I don't think the government will reverse, this government, U.S. government will reverse prior decisions. I think the focus is going to be a little bit different. And so they may say, well, and they have said, if you pay a lot of money for a gratuity, we may not care about that. So before, if someone had a facilitation payment of $1,000 or more, I would have said, well, you're getting to a level that may draw scrutiny. And if you have one payment of $1,000 as a facilitation payment, you may have others. And that all of those others collectively may look like you're doing business not ethically and not in compliance. Well, the U.S. government has said, we don't care about that. Now, I'm not suggesting you say to your businesses, you can go up to $1,000 now for facilitation payment, but things like that, gifts, travel, and entertainment, I don't think the government's going to really care too much about those things anymore that we have thought were important. But they certainly are going to care about payments to foreign government officials. So it will not be a change in the law. It will be a change in perhaps the focus of where they look going forward. In terms of what the compliance professional needs to do with your corporate compliance program, you need to take a look at where you're doing business. So Mexico has now, jumped up to a very high-risk jurisdiction because of these cartels being redesignated as foreign terrorist organizations. So, and the same for Colombia, Ecuador, Venezuela, countries in Central America that may not have been as high. Certainly Venezuela was, but other countries may not have been at their level of corruption. Well, now they're equally high risk because of these designations of cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. That's number two. But number three is, once again, you don't have to revamp or bring new strategies into your compliance program. You have to do what you've done in the anti-corruption world, but broadened out to looking at other companies in a way that you perhaps have not done so before, particularly in your supply chain.
Right. Just a follow-up question, Cynthia. You gave us a good list of countries that are on the list that the are considered as higher risk. Do you hear if Brazil's on that list or is about to be included? Because you probably have followed what's going on here in Brazil and the combat of all of the crime factions.
So, given the political differences between the Trump administration and Brazil, it wouldn't surprise me.
Right. That's what I thought. Do you care to elaborate a
I
little
was going to
bit
say,
more on
could you
this?
comment? Could you comment,
I
Tom? I
know
think we
it's
would
not,
all,
it's not the theme or anything, but I would love to hear
yes.
your opinion.
Comment on what, Cynthia?
Comment a little bit on the current state of and the relationship between the U.S. and Brazil, and what your thoughts are, what the future holds for Brazil, given our administration being at
We
times at
know it's not.
conflict. Yeah, I know it's off a little bit off topic, but I think
But
your thoughts and your insights, being in the U.S. and the expert that you are, we would definitely learn from you.
Well, I'm not sure I'm the deity on high on such matters, but obviously Trump favors the prior president of Brazil, was very upset when he was convicted, and sanctioned the individual judge in the case, and that's a level of retribution we have not seen at foreign countries before. So
is it really? It's real because here in Brazil we hear it, but we think it's Bolsonaro's family and the parties and everyone kind of enhancing this, and we think that Trump doesn't really care. But do you think he does?
I think he does. I mean, this is
Interesting.
obviously not Brazil, but he has said this week he's going to intervene in Netanyahu's corruption trial in Israel to get him
I
off.
saw that.
And so he's decided that he can intervene literally anywhere in the world for something he doesn't like on a whim. So it's not a way to run a country, and it's not a way to run your foreign relations, but here we are.
Emperor, right?
Emperor. And it's one thing to be emperor here. It's another thing to be emperor of the world. So now I must temper those remarks that there was some type of rapprochement when Lula was in the United States for the UN opening in September, and there was some private conference between Trump and Lula. So maybe there's hope things won't be as bad as they could get, but it's not just the political retribution, it's trade, it's who Brazil trades with, which should be Brazil's decision. But Trump wants to make it his decision. So are you going to do business with China? Are you going to do business with people who do business with Russia? Things that would have seemed to have been sovereign decisions by decisions by a sovereign nation such as Brazil, Trump is inserting himself into. And then the next part is what's going to happen tomorrow, and nobody knows. I mean, he got mad at Canada because they ran a Ronald Reagan clip. It's just there's no rhyme or reason to any of this. And for me to say, well, he's going to do A because B happened, there's no way to know what B will be. Maybe if Lula says something that pisses him off, he raises tariffs another 30%.
Mm-hmm.
We just don't know because it's so chaotic.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Tom. It means a lot to us because we're so blinded by, all of the talks here and the gossips and everything that
Mm-hmm.
we really, I asked my family in the States, but, they kind of tired of everything Trump or Lula or Bolsonaro. They don't follow it. But I have a question from João Elec, who's hasn't been able to really put his question in the Q&R here. And then Ricardo Lemes had raised his hand. Ricardo, let us know if you still want to have a question there. And in the meantime, I will read João Elequi's question. João Elequi is a dear friend, as you probably remember, Tom, was a compliance officer of Petrobras during all of the turmoils. And he's asking, to the extent that monitorship is not a priority of the current administration, should the compliance officer take over the role of a monitor? And in order to avoid being perceived as a harsh colleague, should the board provide the CCO full support and protection to allow that the CCO accomplish the challenge?
Well, let me start with number 2 because that's the easy one. Absolutely. But let me talk about this, and you may want to jump in, Isabel, as well on this around the idea of a monitor or a CCO taking over that role. I would advocate for an outside expert to come in for a couple of reasons. Number one, you can get a true subject matter expert. Now, I'm not saying chief compliance officers at Brazilian corporations are not subject matter experts,
Oh, they're
but when
the
you can
best.
bring in an Isabel Franco or Tom Fox, you can have the best of the best. But more importantly, you get an outside perspective. And if you, as we would say, gaze at your navel long enough, you're going to quit seeing it. And if you're looking at your own program long enough, you may not see things that other people see. And when you can have a outside true subject matter expert assess your program, and I don't mean look at it, I mean test it, assess it, look at the data, look at the numbers, pressure test it, look at all of your due diligence, look at all of your third-party reports, look at all of your training, look at all of your discipline and incentives, you get a different perspective and they're going to see things that you won't see. And then the final point is, I don't want to say political, but if you're a CCO and an outside monitor, you'll voluntarily engage, says, I really think you should do 1, 2, and 3. You can take that to your CEO and say, this is not me. I'm not asking for this. This is what the monitor has suggested. And we've agreed to engage this monitor, and we gave them full reign to assess and report back on their assessments. And this is what they're seeing. Do we have to do this? I don't know, but this is what the monitor has suggested. So politically, it may be easier for you to use that. So I would advocate if you're in the position where you can bring a true subject matter expert in and allow them to do the assessment and do the testing and report the results back fully and, just fully, I think it can be a very powerful tool for you to use.
Absolutely. That's my experience, by the way. Tom, you're absolutely right. All of my clients were, I was either the monitor or the lawyer for the company. They use it both ways. Sometimes it's very nice, positive, and sometimes negative, because just as you said, they say, no, it's the monitor saying that. On the other hand, they would blame everything on the monitor, so it's the two sides of that coin. We Ricardo Lims is raising his hand, and then we have a question on the Q&R by Thiago. I don't know if we can unmute Ricardo's microphone. Tati and Duda. Ricardo, are you able to? because he's probably having the same problem
Yes.
as. Okay.
Oh, there he is.
Go ahead. Very good.
Thank you. I couldn't find a place to post my question. So, and I sent it through emails. Thank you. Tom, thank you for your insights. My question relates to compliance in sports league throughout the world. Most of the betting companies are international. And what are the key compliance checkpoints we should be aware of? Thank you.
Well, are you talking about what are the key compliance checkpoints for the sports leagues? Are you talking about the key compliance checkpoints for the betting companies? Are you talking about the key compliance checkpoints for the consumer or customer, like perhaps you or I? Which is your audience here?
I'm thinking related to the betting companies. They're spreading all over, at least here in Brazil, all over the countries in all sectors. And we well, the public as consumers, I must, I'm not a consumer of that, but many companies are finding this as easy money to support their marketing, and they're raising their funds. So what are the compliance issues that the companies should be aware of when they contract these betting companies to sponsor them?
So is your question something along the lines of, I'm Tom Fox, Worldwide Energy Company. I come to Brazil, legalized gambling exists, and I'm considering having a energy company sponsor, or is it
Yes,
something
that's
different?
it. Yeah. As a company, we hire betting companies to sponsor our activities. And
Okay.
what are the I know there's due diligence involved, but there's some really specific aspects that we should be aware of, and that's what I would like to know.
Well, that's a very interesting question, but you're going to have to start with, what is the risk appetite of your organization? And risk can obviously come in many forms. You can have legal risk, product risk, but you can have reputational risk. And if you are willing, you have to decide, if these betting companies get in trouble somehow, is it going to backburn on us, or is it going to blow back on us? And do we want to be associated with that? Now, in the United States, I do have a little more experience in the US. So legalized gambling exists now in the United States. In most states, it is not in the great state of Texas. But you can bet online, and many people do. And those companies, I would say, have a pretty good reputation as sponsors. And so the sports leagues are the most frequent users of betting companies as sponsors. Excuse me, yes, as business sponsors. Now, the problem is, and we're in the middle of a little mini scandal right now, so it's in front of most sports fans' minds, of which I am one. Is it the responsibility of the betting company, or the companies that they're sponsoring, to make sure nothing illegal or untoward happens? And if the betting companies are robust in their data analytics programs, then people are not as concerned about the illegality or the reputational harm from a betting company. But I think for you, you'd have to start with, what's our risk appetite? Are we willing to do business with a company that could make our reputation, damage our reputation? If you have a conservative board or conservative management, the answer may be no. If you're an entrepreneur, or your board has an entrepreneurial spirit, or your senior management comes from an entrepreneurial background, they may be willing to do so, and are willing to potentially take that risk. You obviously want to look at their anti-money laundering program, or their financial crime and fraud packages, and hopefully they'd be willing to show that to you. But I would just do the due diligence that you would do with any sponsor. But you have to start with, what's our risk appetite if this all goes wrong? Does that answer what
Yeah.
you were asking me?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Cynthia?
One question here
Chat.
from on the PNR. Um, from Tiago Coscarelli. He's saying, referring to your example of the bank in Mexico, what specific measures should compliance officers take to remain compliant, particularly in situations where they have limited or no direct access to who the bank's clients are?
So I would not really start with the bank's clients. I would start with the ownership structure and see, is there any beneficial owners that are not disclosed? Are there any corporations which are owners, which might be shell corporations? So I'd really start with that. But you're going to ask that specific question. Now, that shouldn't offend any bank. And every bank should say, no, we don't do business with drug cartels. And they should certify to that effect. So it's remember, due diligence is not infallible. It's not going to give you 100% right answer every time. It's a part of a package of a third-party risk management strategy, which it's one part. It's a key part, but it's only one part. And you have to manage that relationship through contractual terms and conditions. And then after the contract is signed, you have to manage it. So you can ask that question even if you don't have access to that specific information in terms of your background due diligence. But I would heavily focus on the ownership structure and making sure that the bank doesn't have any owners you can't identify and you cannot perform due diligence on.
Thank you. I have a question. Oh, Cynthia, go ahead if you have one.
No. Thank you, Tom.
Tom, I don't know if you're following what's going on here in Brazil. I think you are in terms of some of the penalties being reduced. Penalties in the DPAs and NPAs that were signed with the Brazilian authorities and the DOJ and SEC. And because you mentioned that it's a certain joint venture between UK, France, Switzerland, and how do you see that these other countries consider what's going on, both in the States and in Brazil? Because Brazil is nullifying some of these agreements that were sort of tied with the DPAs and other agreements or plea bargains.
I don't think those other agreements have any impact on what other countries do or don't do. I think they'll assess it under their own laws and make their own decisions. In the United Kingdom, for instance, DPAs have to have judicial approval. So the prosecutor and the company have to apply to a judge to explain why it's in the public interest that a DPA be granted. So I don't think it's going to have much, if any, effect.
Right. The fact that they did the settlement together and they later, years later, other countries change around, that doesn't matter for them. Right? Okay, good. Thank you. Cynthia, there is another question.
Yeah, I think there's one more question here from Ricardo de Moraes Dandalo. Hi, Tom. With the potential inclusion of Brazilian criminal factions as TCOs in the U.S., what precautions should we take in our dealings with American companies?
Excellent question.
That's a good question.
So it's not so much your dealings with American companies, it's are you subjecting yourself to U.S. jurisdiction? Now, that's a variety of ways to do that. If you are owned by or a U.S. company has an interest in a Brazilian company, that could be a way. If somehow part of all this happened in the United States, either in physically, like in Miami, but more importantly, email communications that would be routed through a U.S. server that could be a way to create jurisdiction. Or if money was paid through a U.S. banking system, somehow it got routed, you either paid through or received funds from a bank in the United States. So those would be the main ways that U.S. jurisdiction would attach. If you're a Brazilian company doing business in Brazil and you get in one of these situations without U.S. jurisdiction, the U.S. is not going to take notice.
Yeah, I think we've seen a lot of concern around the Brazilian criminal factions. There's a lot of concern around how the U.S. will treat structures that do business with them, sometimes unknowingly. But I know it's been the topic of a lot of conversations with clients and colleagues. And I think we'll just have to wait and see what's going to happen there. That's great. Val, I think you're on mute.
Yes. Right. I'm sorry. It's the system, and it does it automatically. I think we have time for just one more question, but if there's none, we will let Tom go because his woke up very early this morning, right, Tom? I can't
So
say
if I could,
please.
this is a little bit different than our topic, but if you're interested in podcasting, I'm doing a podcasting for business conference next week. It's a virtual event. It's free, and I'm going to put registration in the chat. We would love to have anyone who's interested in starting a podcast and being on a podcast, or just interested in podcasting. You can join us. So please feel free to do so.
Also, and you know what I should emphasize here that I never do, Tom, is the fact that you're a consultant, that anyone here in Brazil can reach out directly to him and have any sort of consultation with him and retain him for anything. In fact, we at Azevedo Sette would love to do this all the time, and sometimes we do, right? And ask his opinion on something. Isn't that because he is a lawyer, and the evangelist also, and then the great consultant. Correct, Tom?
Yes to all the above.
By the way, do you have any new books?
So I am nearly finished with a book on investigative strategies from Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, wow.
So I took the 4
Nice.
Sherlock Holmes novels, The Scarlet, or Study in Scarlet, Hound of the Baskervilles, The Valley of Fear, and The Sign of Four. I mined them all for investigative lessons, and I wrote a book about that. And I just have to do my final edit on that. The Compliance Handbook, I'm writing the 7th edition, which will be out next year. And sort of unrelated to compliance, the July 4th flood that you may have heard about in the United States happened in my hometown.
Yeah.
And so I'm writing a book about that. So those are the books I'm currently working on.
Wonderful. And then tell us a little bit more about your books being on Amazon.
Yes. So my books, let's see. My latest book.
It's a great reference. That's
Yes,
the book
this
that we
is
use here.
Upping Your Game. It's about the use of technology, specifically AI, in a best practice compliance program going forward. So that's my most recent compliance book.
Great, great. And besides that, for those of you who are come here for the first time, Tom has the best books, and those are the books that we use for reference every time we need anything in the United States, not only the United States, because his concepts on compliance are universal, right? So with that, Cynthia, do you want to say anything? I just wanted to close and wish everyone a fabulous end of the year, and we'll have Tom again next year. We don't have the date yet, but we want to wish you all, it's a little bit too soon, but a wonderful holidays. Cynthia?
Yes, I was just going to thank everyone for joining us, and Tom especially for all the time he gives all of us with his insights. Thank you, Tom. And I look forward to reconnecting in the new year.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.